get out there, catch more fish.
Hey guys, Mike here from Binya Outdoors. I normally have my guests introduce themselves, but if you don't know who the man next to me is, then you probably just need to stop watching this and go watch some more YouTube because this is the guy who is literally the reason why I have a channel. And the reason for that is because I always thought that you had to have a templated way, you had to follow a formula, you had to act gimmicky, and you had to do all this stuff to make it on YouTube. And that couldn't be further from the truth. This guy next to me does what he does not change for anyone, and is very successful on YouTube. So Mr. Alex Rudd is in the house with us, and we're here to talk fishing.
What kind words. I really appreciate that, man. That makes me happy. It makes me happy that to hear that. And the reason for that is because that's just the honest truth of the way I look at YouTube. Like so many people, I get so many messages and everybody's like, how do I start a YouTube channel? I'm just like, send it. Just
Do
send it. I mean, just do it. Just start. And like, it's like being in a band. Nirvana wasn't Nirvana the first time they played together. Like it's not like they sit down and like, Smells Like Teen Spirit was like just popped out of Kurt Cobain's mouth and guitar.
Yep.
No, it's like they had to suck for a little while and then they got good. And man, that's always been my philosophy with this thing is just stay true to myself and just send it and figure out what works and what doesn't. But man, I appreciate the kind words and I'm glad to be here. I'm looking forward to whatever comes along. You said it's like we just met at the boat ramp and we're talking about fishing. So here's all my responses. Ready? I caught them on a bait in the water on my rod and my reel over there near that one place. And that's all I got for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. See you.
You know what's funny about that though? Now that you say that, so I do that all the time, and you get two different responses at the boat ramp. I've noticed. So like if I come off and I'm just like loading my boat up and somebody's heading out, I'll be like, "Hey, green pumpkin chatterbait off of points." Just sheer information.
Yep.
And I get two looks. I get either "Thank you, I appreciate that information," or I get the "Fuck you, don't talk to me." I don't understand. Like, it's not like I'm like, "Hey, don't fish my lake." It's like I'm literally giving you what I just spent 6 hours figuring out.
Dude, well, is the other day I fished a kayak tournament, and I'll be honest, I'm not going to say what I was fishing on because I got another kayak tournament on the same lake, not this week, but next week. It's on Cherokee Lake, and I'm fishing not this tournament. I made like $400. The next tournament I fish in, though, I got a chance to win like $3,000. So I'm kind of keeping it on the down low what I was throwing and not putting the video out until anyway. But like I pull up and the dudes in the boat were like, "Hey, did you catch him?" I was like, "Yeah, I actually won the tournament I was fishing today." And they were like, "Oh, really?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "What were you throwing?" And I told them exactly what I was throwing, down to the color, size, and everything. And they both looked at me like, "You lying son of a bitch." And I'm just like, "Okay, y'all have a good day. I'm going to go collect my money and go back to the house." And it was just the strangest interaction I've ever had with two humans where I like told them exactly what I was throwing, but they just looked at me like, "No, you're not." And I'm like, "Okay, I guess I wasn't the one doing that." So yeah, I get that though. I hear that.
It's so funny too because, and I'm sure it's even like worse for you, but like when you have a camera too, like you get two different responses. Another thing at the bow rep, like I have kids that will run over to my kayak and like demand to know what my channel is.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, "Dude, I have 100 subscribers. I'm not that big, but yeah, here." I had literally printed out business cards
I love it.
with like a QR code on the back of them so that I could just hand it to them to look it up because so my YouTube name, the reason where the Binya came from is Binya was a nickname for my son as a baby. So what literally happened was I used to just like make weird noises to make him laugh like you do with a baby. And the one thing he would always giggle to was I would like take his lip and go, "Binya, Binya, Binya, Binya." And he would laugh. So that became his nickname. So I just slapped outdoors on the end of it and it became a thing. But
I like it. I dig it.
It was one of those things. But one thing I want to ask you, speaking of kayak tournaments, so do you have like a standard loadout that you just use, or do you literally pack for the lake that you're fishing?
I pack for the lake that I'm fishing on. I think a lot of that comes from the fact that I fish out of a boat primarily. And so I've kind of got that, I guess, convenience or luxury of being able to have all my stuff in one place. And so I'm transferring it from my primary place to my secondary place kind of deal. You know what I mean?
Makes sense.
And so, like when I look at like a lake of, where I'm going, like, this next week, there's like a set of things that Okay, let me back up a little bit. Let me back kind of I'll explain my whole process on how I get my crap together.
Okay.
So the first thing that I do is I'm a big like record keeper and I like to go back and look at what's worked in the past. Now I
Yep.
know a lot of people will like they preach against that. They're like, you got to fish the moment. And I agree with that. Like I'm a big fish the moment kind of guy too. Fish
Yeah.
your instincts, fish the moment. But there's also something to be said about knowing what you've done in the past,
Yep.
especially when certain conditions you're faced with. Well, what's hilarious is last year on the same exact week, and like just a date separate because it's a later day in the year. It's like it was instead of the 7th, it was the 8th this year. I won a tournament on the same exact bait in the same exact depth of water, catching almost the same exact like bunch of fish
Yep.
as I did the year before, as I did this past week on this lake.
Yep.
And so, like, I was able to look at that and go, hey, I might want to make sure I've got this bait, and this bait in the kayak with me because I know this worked in the past. And then I get there and I'm faced with essentially the same exact conditions that I was faced in when I won the tournament before. And so that kind of helps me to piece that together. So that's one big thing I do. I mean, I'm always looking at pictures. I write things down, especially like when I do really well, I'll take notes, write it down in my notes on my phone or even have a notebook, write stuff down in. And then I'll go look at pictures, past videos and stuff like that. And then I kind of just build the kayak out how I may need it going forward. And then I stick a bunch of extras in there too, just stuff that I think,
Yeah.
oh, hell, they may be eating a popper, or hey, I might want to toss that frog in there just in case there's a pollen mat or something in the back of this one pocket where a 4-pounder could be sitting. Just
Yep.
have those few extra things, but for the most part, I'm building it out lake to lake to lake that I'm going to. It's just easier for my kind of process of having the boat and keeping everything in the boat and transferring it back and forth.
That the reason why I asked that is because I just started doing more like live tournament stuff. I
Mhm.
did a lot of like the KBF, challenge series
Mhm.
stuff and
Yeah.
crap like that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be traveling 3 hours to a
Mhm.
tournament. Every single tournament I'm traveling to is in Massachusetts because Vermont doesn't have a kayak trail at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
So I have to travel to Massachusetts.
Mhm.
And I'm actually going down Saturday to fish with you've actually been on Jigs and Bigs, Bobby Roast Beef
Yeah.
is on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
fishing with Bobby this weekend.
Cool, man.
We're doing like a camp out thing, but I'm thinking about packing for that trip, and then I'm fishing next weekend. I have my first tournament, and
Yeah.
I'm like packing, and I'm in my mind it's like always back and forth because it's like it's hard to leave stuff at home
Hmm.
because I'm like, what if I need it? What
Exactly.
if I'm in the middle of the lake and
Yeah.
I need that crankbait? And
Yeah.
it's like, so I'm trying to like figure out what my system is going to be because I tend to overpack and that I have so many baits that I get kind of like bait lock. Like
Yeah.
I don't know what to use now because I've got so many different things.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to be more like analytical, like kind of like you are. Like I'm not necessarily writing it down yet, but I probably should start.
Yeah.
Is I'm trying to figure out like what should I bring at what time of year? Because I am noticing the same thing. I went fishing yesterday and all the baits I caught on were baits that looking back at some of my previous videos, like you said, like that's one thing about doing content creation is it's kind of nice because I can go, hey, what did I catch last spring? Because I can
Yeah.
go watch the video from last spring.
Yeah.
But same colors, same spots. Kind of like you said, same colors, same spots.
Yep.
It's that deal.
Well,
So
and
I
dude,
just
and like it's even more than that. That like that's applicable on multiple bodies of water too. Like that's one thing is like people they get very caught up in this like you know sense of well this only works here. No,
yeah,
dude, I can take what I'm doing and I can apply it in Oklahoma just like I apply it in Tennessee, just like I would apply it in Michigan, just like I would go down to Florida and apply it. I mean, yes, there's these different nuances, especially like with Florida. Florida is kind of its own beast. But
right.
even like Texas, like when I went to Texas, dude, I went to Texas blind. I had no idea what I was doing. The lake I'd never been to before, never even seen it. I watched a couple of YouTube videos about it, and I get out there and I tried to do what the YouTube videos told me to do, which was like, you got to fish deep, you got to fish finesse. So
Yeah,
I try to fish deep and I try to fish finesse, and I don't get a bite. And then finally, I just pick up a flipping stick, and I go to flipping, and I'm like, there has to be bass on those trees back there because if it was at home right now and it was June and it was this hot, I would be in the back of a pocket flipping trees. And hell, that's what I went and did. And I came in second in that tournament. And it's like one of those things. It's like that's an instinctual thing. It's like not only is there a little bit of the past there, like, hey, I've seen this situation before, but that's what forms that instinctual drive that you have when
yeah,
you're out on the lake that you can go, I've seen that before. I know in that situation what I need to do here. And like there's more and more baits that like kind of I'm adding to the toolbox as we go along. And like at first it was the whopper plopper. And like when I figured out situationally where the whopper plopper worked, I was like, oh crap. There's like 52 different places that I could have been throwing the whopper plopper and probably getting bites where I didn't have that tool before.
Yep.
And it's like, dude, that's when you get those things a knocking and all those cylinders start knocking together is when you're like, oh, I just like leveled up a little bit as a fisherman. Like I went
Yep.
from level 10 to level 11 and like learned a new move. You
Yep.
know what I mean?
Exactly. No, it's so that's what I've started. That's what happened to me last year. Is so last year it's funny because it's because of YouTube, but like I decided that I was gonna start doing more educating, more
Mhm,
like this is how you work a crankbait, but like basic stuff. Like literally this year, I've kind of done the same thing, but it's like I didn't want to try to teach something until I was comfortable with it. So I
mhm.
had to kind of keep doing different techniques. And like
Yeah.
you said, you get to that point where you're like, well, the last time I was fishing a laydown like this, I used this color on this corner of the tree and I cast it in this specific kind of target. So you repeat that stuff. And that's actually, I think, the thing about fishing that's like, I think sometimes we humanize fish too much.
Yes, absolutely.
We give them too
1000%.
much credit, I think. And then we are the reason why we're not catching fish because we overthink it
Mhm,
and we do too much work. And like I've pared down a lot of my baits because I did the same thing and I found the same trap that everybody did. I saw a bait online that somebody was catching fish with. I went and bought it. I saw a color at the store. I went and bought it. And then
mhm.
at the end of the day, I've got 7 or 8 3,700 boxes of baits that I've never caught fish on
Yeah, I mean,
because
there's only a
filled
few
up.
colors that I've ever experienced that like I get that specific color because it works better than other colors. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
but for the most part, like I put in my big order that I put in every year with Pure Fishing, I ordered green pumpkin and black and
Yep.
June bug.
Yep.
That's 3
Dude.
colors that I ordered. Like those are my plastics for the whole year outside of
Yep.
like shad presentation. I mean, obviously like power stingers, I ordered those in white, you know, that
Right. Yep.
but even then, like my power stingers, like white and
White.
then white with silver flake. Like,
Yep.
dude, that's
Yep.
it. Like, if people wanna overcomplicate it, and I used to overcomplicate it, and I mean, I think there is some instances where they'll bite one color better than the other. I mean, one example is it's called South African Special. I don't know what it is about that color. It's got purple, red, and silver flake in it. It's a
Yep.
black base with purple, red, and silver flake. There is a period of time in the post spawn that I will get bites 3 to 1 over a straight black or a green pumpkin with that color. I don't know why, but it is just one of those weird particular things. You know what I mean? But for the most part, man, it's just like keep it simple: white,
Yep.
black, green pumpkin, and something that kind of looks like a bluegill and a crawdad. Like
Yep.
you get those 5 things because I mean, in nature, really, when you look at a bass, for the most part, I mean, there's those outlying examples. I mean, because a bass will put anything in its mouth. I mean, they're going to eat a bluegill, a crawdad, or a shad.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
about it. And the
Yep.
only thing that you need to do is look at your bluegills, your crawdads, and your shad or other bait fish like a perch or something. And you need to go, what colors are they? What size are they? I think more importantly than anything, what size are they and how do I match that? Because like this past weekend, the tournament that I was fishing, one thing that I noticed, again, not to get too deep into it, just in case, there was a certain bait fish that was spawning, alewives were spawning,
Okay.
and they were like, 4 to 5 inches long, slender body, a little bit of purple in them. And dude,
Yep.
the bass were literally blowing them out of the water. So what do I pick up? I pick up something that's looks like that, and I catch the crap out of them on it. And like,
Yep.
it's simple. I mean, we try it. It's called anthrop. I always cannot get this word out of my redneck mouth. Anthropomorphize animals. And what that means is you give an animal a human characteristic. And we really do with
Yep.
bass and anything. I
That.
mean, deer are the same way. Like guys who hunt big deer, like, oh, there comes Leroy and he knows my smell and all that. It's like, no, yeah, there you go. It's like Leroy don't know your smell. Leroy is just
No.
going off a set of instincts that's kept him alive since the day his mama dropped him on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Leroy knows that smell means I might get hurt. That's all he
exactly.
really knows.
Exactly,
Yeah.
man. So yeah, dude, no, I like that philosophy. I like that thought process that you got going there. I mean, we do sometimes. Now, that being said, this is the same guy that'll be like, now listen, You got to dip just the quarter, the last quarter of the claw in chartreuse, and
Yep.
it's got to be green pumpkin, green chartreuse. Because if it's just green pumpkin, they're not going to eat it. But again,
Yep.
that's some of these stingy lakes around here with these just grumpy fish in them that don't want to eat anything but that. Like it was like that Blaze money badger this year, dude.
Yep.
They ate that color better than they ate any other color, and I have little video evidence where I was catching them on the Blaze tail, which is the matte back with the orange belly.
Yep.
I switched to the Blaze, and they went from getting it in the side of their head to the back of their throat, and there was something about that specific color
Yep.
that they just ate it better, and so that's the one that I switched over to. And so, I mean, it's still that kind of philosophy, though. You got a green pumpkin orange, and you've got an all orange, and so basically, you're in the same realm of existence here. It's kind of like, yeah, we could get the job done with a table saw, but we really need a jigsaw.
Yep.
Like you can get the job done, but if you had the jigsaw, you could get the job done really well. And that's kind
Yep.
of that thing.
No, see, that's funny because you can tell. That's one thing that I've noticed, and I've kind of tried to pay attention when I'm at the boat ramp.
Yeah.
So old guys, the old guys with the John boats, right? For
Mhm.
what's the first thing they do when they go to launch? They walk down the ramp and they look at the water.
Mhm.
They're checking water clarity,
Mhm.
and there's always bluegill or there's always bait fish around that boat dock. So I started doing that because what I've noticed is, like yesterday when I went fishing, what I noticed is all the fish that were around the boat ramp were this big. They were
Mhm.
all fry.
Mhm.
So I downsized all my baits
Mhm.
because I'm like, this is what's here.
Mhm.
This is what they're going to eat. And that's something that I've learned is like the match to hatch philosophy. But I think for you too, though, like for me, I'm fishing a lot of small ponds. So I don't have as much pressure. There is pressure, but not Tennessee boat tournament every weekend pressure.
Yeah.
So when you say like I'm the guy that says you got to dip a quarter in, that reason why though is it because they haven't seen a worm with a quarter-inch chartreuse. They've
Yep.
seen the black blue worm. They've seen the
Yep.
June bug worm. So you're throwing a tiny
Mm.
alteration that they're not scared of it. They're not looking at that going, "Oh no, I know there's a hook in that."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I mean,
That
dude,
little thing.
It's it I love the water clarity thing too, man. I think so many people look at me and think that I've got some sort of secret bullet in my gun, and I don't. I'm really actually a terrible fisherman compared to some people that I've fished around, but I'm very rudimentary in how I fish, and I think that's what helps me to catch more fish is just I it's the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. Like I am still the dude who, even though I know it says 4 feet on my graph, I'll take my rod and I'll stick it down just to make sure.
Yep.
I'll still look at the water clarity and go, huh, that's a little bit dirtier than I thought it was. Let me tie on, instead of throwing a white spinnerbait, let me tie on a white bladed jig because it's going to have a little bit more thump.
Yep.
I'm still that guy, like, oh, it's 60 degrees. Yeah, they should be spawning, but if they're not, they could be doing X, Y, and Z. Like, there is a beauty in being simple. And that's the way that I like to fish. And, I think sometimes it hurts me. I think sometimes it helps me. But I think it's one thing that a lot of people, if you're getting into fishing, don't overcomplicate it at first. Just
Yep.
ease your way into the complication. You know what I mean? It's like a
Yep.
doctor doesn't do brain surgery the first day of medical school. He does it the
Yep.
15th year of medical school. And
Yep.
it's like that slow progression of learning. Like I said, with content creation too, you got to suck for a little while, and then you
Yep.
build the toolbox over time. And all I have is a deeper and wider toolbox than some people. And the only reason I have that is because I've been blessed to have been fishing since I was big up enough to hold a rod and reel in my hand, and then also fish with a dad who was a very proficient fisherman and who was a good tournament angler, and who had this like instilling of, yes, you need to be a savage, like cutthroat angler when it comes to tournament time. But then there's also this other side of fishing where it's this relaxing, fun, conservation minded side of fishing. And somehow I've met this like weird hippie, but I'll still try to cut your head off on tournament day, like in
Yep.
between that I am. You know what I mean? And so, dude, it's just, it's food for thought. It's like that's how I like to think. And I think it's different than some people, maybe. I don't know.
Well, no, so that's actually why I gravitated to your channel
Yeah.
because when you're fishing, you fish like I fish.
Mm.
Like you're not you look at it, you look at the situation, and then you're just okay, this is my instinct, this is what I'm going to throw.
Mhm.
You don't, and this is something I say on my videos a lot is The fish don't know that there's a playbook that you're supposed to follow.
Yeah, yeah, good point.
So the bass aren't going to follow the playbook just because it's cloudy and the wind is a certain direction and the water clarity is this does not mean that the bass has to bite that bait.
Nope.
They just, and that's actually, so I have ADHD and I think most fishermen do, to be honest with you,
Mhm,
because the competition side, I played sports in high school and I'm a very competitive person. And the difference between, in my mind, fishing than other sports and other competition that I've ever done is that on Monday is different than Tuesday, is different than Tuesday afternoon, is
mm,
different than Tuesday night. So
mm.
you can't like, I think that's why people with like ADHD tend to flock towards fishing because you can't master it.
Yep.
You can't learn like a football. I'm not saying I could ever be Tom Brady, but you can learn how to throw a spiral. You can learn how to hit a target.
There's consistencies in other sports that we don't have in
Right.
our venture. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I agree with that. I mean, that's why I loved being a teacher because even though there was a routine, it was different every
Right.
single day. You know what I
Right.
mean? And like my job now, like, hey, I got a routine, but it's different every single day. And I say it all the time. I'm just like, this is the plan, but you know what
Right.
plans are. Like there's no expectation of the plan working because I could get out there and for some reason the water's 65, but there's no fit. Like yesterday, I went out and water's 65 degrees. There's no fish on beds. They're all still
Yeah.
in 6, 7, 8 foot of water. And like they're just doing that weird like thing that they do before they move up on a bed where they grab a bait and run off with it, because it's
Yep.
just a bunch of bucks that are just like hanging out, getting ready to do the bed fishing thing. It's like there's some kind of like switch in their head that they've hit that, like, hey, I'm just going to jack with this because I don't like it, but I'm
Yep.
not actually going to eat it. And it's like, so in my mind, I went out there, I'm like, I'm going to throw a buzz bait in the morning, catch them, and then I'm going to pick up this Texas rig and go to work on them. And if I can't get them to eat the Texas rig, I'm going to throw the wacky rig.
Yep.
Threw it all out the door within the first 5 minutes because I was like, "These fish are not doing what I thought they were
Yep.
gonna do." Even though the conditions say, "Hey, yeah, they are doing this,"
Yep.
doesn't mean it's a thing with a brain. Like a football doesn't have a brain.
Yep. Exactly.
We deal with
Yep.
something with a brain. Yeah, it's hard to deal with.
Yeah, and that's I think the biggest thing that is that's probably also the reason why bait makers make the money that they make though, because then everybody, the problem is like kind of going back to the keep it simple is what happens is some guys think it's the bait. They don't
Mhm,
realize that they just need to make a slight check. Like some guys will go drastic. Like for me, it's I have a set of confidence baits and then I'll experiment with other stuff when I don't catch fish just because why not?
mhm,
But like you don't have to change drastically. Sometimes, like you say, a quarter inch of chartreuse, like
mhm.
or changing areas because they're not here.
I'm telling you, Edwin Evers said it best. The wrong bait in the right place will get bit every single time.
Yep,
Because you put that
absolutely.
thing in front of that thing's face, there's
Yep,
just natural you and when I say that, I think a lot of people they look at it too simply, but there's a lot of depth to that statement. So the wrong thing in the right place. So the right place indicates that you've got a bass that's positioned the correct way, that's looking to eat something, and there's a reason that that bass is sitting there looking to eat something. And so
yep,
you've got a bass that is, yes, he's going to eat. And it doesn't matter if you put a depths 250 over the top of his head or if you put a Ned rig in front of him, he's going to swim over to it and he's going to eat it. And like dude, it's a mindset that you got to get yourself in, that it's not the bait, it's not the
yep,
rod, it's not the reel, it's not even the line, it's not the vessel that you're on. It's all the set of conditions that's driving that bass to be in that location, and knowing that that set of conditions is going to drive that bass to be in that location, and then how to adjust off of that when it's not exactly how you think it is, or like I said earlier, when we go from the table saw to the jigsaw. Like, okay, I've figured this bite out, but then how do I
yep,
now find the spot on the spot, or the bait on, the bait modification within the bait? And that's where you start to get really specific, and that's what, these dudes who are pro level, or, dudes who tournament fish a lot, those are the things that they're just a little bit better than a person who doesn't do those things, because that pressure kind of puts that pressure on you to just like find that little bit more specific thing that's going to help you catch.
yep,
Instead of catching a 3.5, you catch a 4.5.
Yep.
And those are the like things. But like I said, it's just a learning process. It's a learning process to get to that point. You know what I mean? And so it's very interesting, man. That's why I love it. I mean, like I am fascinated because what's cool is this past Saturday I win a tournament. I got a week off before I go back to this same lake. I'm going to the same exact location. I'm probably gonna have the same stuff rigged up, but I can promise you that bite is going to be
Right.
drastically different. They're
Yep.
probably going to be in the same area because these fish just don't leave this area. It's kind of just one of those big community hole areas where fish like to live, but they're not going to be probably biting what they were biting last time. And so I'm going to have to adjust and really figure out what they're doing. Because last year at the same time, I came in third in another kayak tournament, and I start out the morning with a top water, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get bit on this top water. I knew I was. I mean, water was 67 degrees. I mean, it was perfect. Oh, I got bit on top water. I caught a giant 30-pound striper. I caught another
Yep.
hybrid, and I caught a freaking walleye on it. And it was
Top water?
on a topwater. It's the damnedest thing I'd ever done. Dude, I thought I hooked a 10-pounder. No
What
joke. 'Cause it
the
was still
hell?
dark. It was the first fish I caught. I threw the stuff. I go, check, check,
Wow.
check. It goes, doof. And I'm like, oh God. And so I get it up next to the boat and I turn my headlamp on because it's still dark. All I see is green flash. And I'm like, I told my buddy, I'm like, it's a 10-pounder. I was like, it's a 10-pounder because he was just so big and long and kind of was a freaking walleye. I was like,
Oh
I told
man.
that fish too. I said, you'd be lucky I'm in a tournament because otherwise your ass would be going home with me.
Gonna say
But
yeah.
but anyway, so I go out down this whole bank with this topwater. I don't get a bass to bite, but everything else bit. So I'm like, okay, there's predatory fish here. There's bait fish here. The bass have to be here. And then I pick up a spinner bait, and my first cast is a 21 and a half incher. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, they're
Yep.
just not wanting to come up on it. They're just, and that's the thing, man.
It's
Is like a lot of people, I think in their fishing mind, they would go, well, they're just not biting. Nope.
exactly.
You just gotta go back through the area with something different, present them in a little bit different way. And when I kinda figured to go through my thought process there because I often struggle to do that. I feel like I do a pretty good job, but to go through my thought process, why did I go from spinner bait or top water to spinner bait? Well, it was because the water was fairly clear, winds blowing into this area. Yes, they've eaten. I've had other predatory fish eat the topwater. That just means that they're a little more aggressive or out competing the bass. And so put something in front of their face that looks like what they're eating, and they were eating threadfin shad.
Yep.
And it's hard to beat a spinnerbait when it comes to threadfin shad when the water's 67, and then
Yep.
a little bit of past experience of catching fish there. And I cracked them. I came
Yep.
in third. You know what I mean? And so like I don't know. It's cool, man. I love it. Like you can tell, I get all geeked up about it when I get to
When
talking about it.
so for those of you guys watching, what he's saying is when you watch videos and you say, I'm trying to find a pattern. That's what he's talking about.
Mhm.
It's and sometimes, believe it or not, the thing that I found, which is really stupid, but it is something that I kind of started to understand last year, is sometimes the pattern is an order of baits that you throw too.
Mhm.
So like you could throw in a lipless and then follow it with something else and catch a fish. You throw that same bait you caught on in that same spot, you're not going to catch that fish because that lipless drew them in. They were curious about what the noise of this rattling thing was, and then they saw the other bait. So sometimes the pattern isn't even just one bait, it's a combination of baits.
A rotation of things. Yeah,
Because I
that's
do that a lot. A lot of times, I've actually done it. You know what I've done with? It's actually kind of funny, but I've done it with redneck as hell, a bobber and a senko, and then I'll roll a lipless by it.
it's interesting.
So I'll roll like a loud bait, loud crankbait, whatever, by a senko just sitting on a bobber
Hmm,
because they'll follow that bait and then they'll see that bobber and they'll hit it because
that's
we're
super
allowed to have two
interesting.
poles at a time here in Vermont. So I've done it. I've actually done it with the gilly. I'll hook it like you're hooking
Uh-huh,
bait.
uh-huh,
So the gilly kind of just sits there
uh-huh.
like a kind of like a dying bait
You got
fish
me
on a
thinking.
bobber.
You see my brain working. That's interesting. I mean, dude, it's like a
It
float
works.
fly. I mean,
Same.
I've
Yeah.
seen instances where a guy in the front of the boat will be throwing a crankbait and the dude in the back of the boat's throwing a floating fly. And it's like he's hammering them. And I think a lot of it has to do with maybe they're too sluggish to eat the crankbait,
Yep.
but it's drawing them up enough that they see that floating fly and they're like, "Oh, well, that's a lot easier to eat than that crank." And that crawdad that was swimming Mach 12 by my face.
Yep.
It's super interesting. Yeah,
So
but
I've
yeah.
done the same thing with like a drop shot with a bait too. Is like I'll drop a drop shot, I'll just
Mhm.
dead stick it, and then
I
I'll
mean, it's
catch
like when a
something by
bass
it.
blows up on your top water and you follow it up with a Cinco. You know
Yep.
what I mean? Like
Same
it's just
idea.
they smoke it. They're used to things fluttering down around their face, and so they come up and they eat it. That's yeah, yeah. I mean, makes sense. Yeah, it's and you're right about the like the rotational thing. Like I have a great example is this past winter. I got on that crankbait bite, but then I also had that red jig. It was essentially the same color as the crankbait. And
Yep.
like I would go through an area with the crankbait and then turn around and then just go pick all the wood apart with the jig.
Yep.
And I would always pick up one or two extra bites. Now it's just one or two extra bites, but I mean, dude, it's one or two extra bites that you didn't get before, and both of
Yep.
them were good ones that I caught in those areas. You know, like I got two bites in a specific area. It was pretty crazy because I went through there and I caught like, 4 or 5 on the crankbait. The best one was probably 2.5 pounds. I pick up the jig and first flip with the jig, I catch almost 4 pounder. And it's like that
Yep.
fish was there. And yeah, he may have bit the crankbait, but he wanted the jig
Yep.
more specifically. And it's just kind of that rotational, that idea of having a rotation of things in your head. And I mean, dude, I've got on bots like that too, where you're like, all right, so this bank, I'm going to throw the swim bait because this bank looks like this other bank that I caught him on a swim bait. And then this next bank, I pick up the jig. And then the next bank, I pick up a wacky rig. And like I've
Yep.
done that too. You know what I mean? So
I
very,
fish a Kitech a lot, like a Texas rig almost.
mm-hmm,
So I'll belly weight, just regular belly weight a Kitech, but I'll like just throw it up against cover and let it sink
mm-hmm,
and not even like reel it, just let it fall.
mm-hmm,
And then I'll pull that up and then I'll throw a Senko in the same spot
mm-hmm.
and then they'll hit the Senko. So it's
Oh,
like a
yeah.
lot of times like they saw that bait fit swim down. They weren't really interested in that and then that slow falling wacky rig. They're already there because they were already curious about what the hell that fish was before
Mhm.
and then they see that slow falling wacky rig and they're like,
It's
okay, I might as well eat this.
It's the same principle as these guys who take these giant swim baits and draw them out just to see where the
Yep.
bites are at and then slow down and go back with something different and get them to bite. I mean,
Yep.
that's the same principle as what those guys are doing. It's you're just doing it in your way. And
Yep.
like that is a great way to fish. I mean, like I've done it. I did on a small lake. I got a video coming out here in a couple days. It'll come out Sunday, but I went fishing this little. We call it the secret lake. It's this tiny little mountain lake. I went fishing it with John, and I was throwing the coal shad. And dude, I had like 6 pounders falling the coal shad off these trees. And so I went back at the end of the day and threw a wacky rig for him and didn't get him to bite. But like what was hilarious is I threw a wacky rig in there and I would see him swim out from the tree and swim down to it. And then they'd swim right back up. And just because they were just being
Yep.
stingy, they're just clear water, stingy bass. But I mean, that's what that is. I mean, like they come out with curiosity to see what this other thing is, and then they take the easier meal because they're big and they're smart. And they're not big for any reason. They're not big because they're dumb. They're big because they're smart,
Yep.
and they're smart
Exactly.
in the sense that they can be smart. But it's very, very interesting. I like the thought process on the Cinco on the bobber. That's a pretty interesting one.
Dude, it's funny. So I have like the secret place. I have this pond. So actually what started my bass fishing career was
Mm,
this pond. My parents, when I was a kid, we used to go camping every summer. We would go for a week.
mhm,
It stopped, when I got in high school and all that. My parents wanted to re-implement that when I had kids.
mhm,
So they found this pond here in Vermont where the campground, the sites are literally on the pond.
mm,
Like you can launch your kayak from your tent site.
mhm, mhm.
And my dad and my mom had gotten kayaks that year because my mom wanted to exercise. And my dad wasn't going to just exercise, so she convinced him by getting him a sit on top Pelican,
Yeah.
which was the most terrifying kayak on the planet. Let me tell you, that thing, I have never sat in. I think you'd be better off on a 2x4. It'd probably be more stable than that kayak was.
I love it.
Dude, it was like if you want to have 6 minute abs,
Yeah.
take that kayak out on a day of the water because you're doing this the entire time. So my brother went out
Uh,
and caught like a 3 pound largemouth.
yeah.
Not monster, but we had been catching like bluegill on
Mhm,
worms.
mhm.
And he caught a 3 pound largemouth on like a freaking MEP spinner.
Wow.
Like nothing fancy, right?
Yeah,
Because no one fishes this place because they don't realize this pond is like 50 acres, if
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Like,
Tiny.
not very big at all. It's
Yeah,
literally there for people to swim in at the campground. That's
it
the
is.
idea behind it. It's a man-made pond.
Yeah.
So, I ended up going out in my mom's kayak after using my dad's because that thing was just terrifying, and we were just slamming bass left and right, and
Crazy.
I
Yeah.
got addicted to it because of the kayak,
Yeah.
and that's what really started it was that little pond, and it
That's
was just
awesome,
from
man.
there. And the YouTube thing was actually not even YouTube, it was my dad. So the reason why I think the way I do for bass fishing is because my dad was a trout salmon, like trolling style fishermen.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
So, and that's predominantly what happens here in Vermont. There isn't, as weird as people think of Vermont like in the bass world, and they think of Champlain and everybody must have a bass boat.
Mhm.
It's really not the case. Most people here have deep V's and they troll for trout.
Yeah, that's the way it is. Michigan's the same way. Like you think, oh my gosh, the fishing's so good up it. No, like everybody fishes to eat. It's just the
It,
way
it's
that
it's
culture
salmon
up
and
there is
trout.
different. Yeah.
So I grew up with like my dad was one of those guys that like he will run a purple spoon over here at 30 feet and a Howie fly over here at 20, like, and
Yeah.
he will have this like thing and you'll get a fish and he will not, that bait will never get a bite on it, but he'll never move it because that bait caused this fish. He's convinced that that's what happened. So that's how I think in bass
Yeah.
fishing. So my YouTube journey started with buying $20 Cam Park GoPros
Yeah.
and mounting them on my dad's boat to make a video for him for Christmas
I love it.
because he
I love
always wanted to show people like, and you've been like, I saw, when you broke your leg, like you've done the deep sea fishing stuff. Like
yeah.
it's quiet and then chaos. And we
Yes.
can
Yes.
never describe that because you're just sitting there rocking and then that pole goes off and just all hell breaks loose. And you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
never really like show that. So I made that video for dad and I loved editing it so much and had so much fun with it that I just kind of started filming my fishing and all of that.
Love it.
And then I discovered, YouTube channels and started watching Tactical Bassin.
Yeah.
And then obviously found your channel and a bunch of other people. And then I was just like, I could do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's not hard. And the funny part about it is the bass progression is like, to keep it simple, like you kind of go up and then back down. Like
Mhm.
you go like, okay, I'm gonna get a Senko and I'm gonna try to catch bass.
Mhm.
And then you go, okay, I need a jerk bait, but I don't know how to work a jerk bait. So I gotta figure out how to work a jerk bait. And
Mhm.
then you buy everything under the sun, and then you're like, I only need green pumpkin because I
Yeah.
catch a green pumpkin.
Yeah. I love it. It's it, man. It's it. You'll find that there's some things that you have to remain complicated, and then there's other things that are just simply simple. And
Yep.
like at the end of the day, I think until it's all done and the earth just whatever happens, like bass are going to eat green pumpkin things. They're
Yep.
going to eat black things. They're going to eat things that look like bait fish, and they're going to eat things that look like bluegill. And
Yep.
like a bladed jig is going to keep on working. And there's going to be companies like Berkeley that come out with things like slobber knocker that works a little bit better for a little while, and then
Yep.
something else will come along because they'll get used to the slobber knocker. And I mean, dude, I think
That's
that's
the only
my
thing.
success with the slobber knocker. To be totally honest with you, is just the simple fact that I got my hands on it literally 6 months before anybody else did. And I was able to expose fish to a brand new sound, a brand new vibration they've never seen before, and they smoked it. And there's still like I ran into a guy fishing Saturday, or no, when was it? Thursday. I ran into a guy fishing Thursday, and he like was like, I caught a few on a slobber knocker. He's like, well, you catch them? I was like, caught him on a slobber knocker. And he's like, really? I ain't got none of them things yet. And I'm like, well, yeah, they work. Well, I see him a few minutes later, and I caught like three more. He's like, well, you catch them on? Catch them on a slobber knocker. He's like, really? And I'm like, yeah, buddy. I was like,
Yep.
it really does work. Like, I was
Yep.
like, it really is a thing. I was like, and that's one thing that amazes me is how much we let the influence of other people's opinions about things influence our opinion on whether we get a thing or not. And now I know, I'm almost,
I
I'm
was gonna say, I've said the guy who's pro YouTuber or semi pro fisherman
yeah.
that
Yeah, and so it's like I'm contradicting my entire existence on YouTube, right? Because
yep.
you're letting somebody
Yep.
else's. But here's the difference between me and just somebody on the internet is that I actually go out and I just catch fish on things, and then I tell you whether it's good or not. I let it
Yep.
speak for itself. You know what I mean? It's like I can't make up a fish catch. Like if a fish
No.
bites something, I can't make that up. Like, and
Right.
you see all the catches on my channel, cast to catch, like into the boat. Watch me take the bait out of their mouth. I
Yep.
can't hide what I'm doing. But it's like, but you'll read a review on Tackle Warehouse, and they're like, oh, the power stinger. Great example. I saw a review on Tackle Warehouse about the power stinger. No action, useless bait. I got, I don't know, 250 plus bass at this point, and
Yeah.
2 tournament wins that say completely otherwise. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's just like, and it's such a weird dynamic that the internet is, because the internet does give everybody a platform, but not everybody needs the platform. And I'm
Well,
speaking for myself here too. I'm a dummy. Like I tell people all the time, like I'm very self-aware. Like I know what I know based off what I've experienced, and that's all I can talk about, and that's all I will talk about. Like, I'm not going to get on here and go, the drop shot is the best bait in the whole entire world. I have cumulatively caught like 10 fish on a drop shot ever. And so I can't speak to a drop shot, but like my buddy Benjamin Nowak can speak to a drop shot
Yeah,
a lot better than I can. And I'll tell you that, like, hey, I may not know, but I know Ben knows. But one of these days, maybe if I get really proficient with it, then I'll have an opinion. But right now, I can't speak to something I don't have experience with. And so, like, that's what another thing that I've kind of built my channel on is just this. I want to be as humble as I possibly can in the fact that I don't know everything. I am a lifelong learner and I'm still learning just like everybody else is, but I do know a few things really well. And like, so if I'm talking about square bill fishing or bladed jig fishing or frog fishing, like, I'm not saying I'm the best, but I've caught quite a few fish on it. I do know a little bit about it, and I can give you from my experience what I've had the best success with. And then you can go to Dean Rojas and get his experience on what he's had the best with. And then you can go to whoever else it may be and get their experiences. And then you have a set of tools that you can go kick ass with,
yep,
because that's the cool part about the internet. Now, that's the positive side of the internet, is that you're able to download and input like 6,000 pieces of information nowadays, where it would take us 6 years to get that
yep.
same amount of information about frog fishing. And so it's just, I don't know, man. Like, I think there's positives and negatives to the way people view fishing YouTube, but I think if you come at it at a level headed way and you look at it at a level kind of like, hey, there's going to be good, there's going to be bad, but let me just get everybody's personal experiences, and you look for people who really want to express that to you, that's when you can really start downloading some awesome information and start broadening and deepening your toolbox.
And I think that's the key for everybody watching is toolbox. So like Slobberknocker, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you right now, fish for fish, I've caught more fish with the original chatterbait than I have the Slobberknocker.
Yep.
But if I go into a place where there's wood, I'm
Mm-hmm.
throwing the Slobberknocker
Yep.
because that chatterbait is going to stay there. It rolls weird, it catches on the wood. That Slobberknocker, I don't know the
It's the hinge.
design. It's got to
So
be something, but yeah,
where the that pin goes through the head, what it
yep,
does, it creates a hinge. And so when you roll up to a piece of wood where a normal chatterbait's going to keep going and
right,
roll and
yeah,
stick, the slobber knocker comes up to the piece of wood and it goes whoop and
yeah,
hinges over that piece of wood and then keeps
yep,
going. I'll tell you another place to throw the slobber knocker over an original chatterbait or a jackhammer, because I still have both in my box. I do. Oh, guess what? Berkeley's not going to cut me tomorrow by saying that. A lot of people
right,
think I'm like, whatever Berkeley says, I'm going to do. Like, yeah, there's some of that, but
yeah.
I'm a company man. Don't get me wrong. Like, listen, I love Berkeley and I am a
Oh, I
company
do
man,
too.
but there's certain situations where like they don't make something or I'm going to throw something different, and it just is
Yep.
what it is. But 99% of the time, I'm throwing a Berkeley thing because I have figured out where it's the best. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Another place to throw the slobber knocker: colder water, because the slobber knocker doesn't hunt like a jackhammer does. It
No,
was never
it's
designed to hunt like a jackhammer
yep,
does. And that's one of the complaints that people have is they say it doesn't hunt like a jackhammer. Well, it's not a jackhammer. It's a slobber knocker. It's a completely different hydrosonic signature. It's a completely different vibration. It's a completely different tuned tool to use. And in colder water, that thing tracking true through the water like that, guess what? They can pinpoint it, they can smoke it, and 99% of the time you're digging it out of their throat. Versus if it was a jackhammer, you'd be hooking them right at the front of the lip because they're not wanting to put in that work to go chase that thing down like that. And so I'm telling you, man, that's another thing I'll get going on. I love, like, that's where I think baits you can get super specific with them,
yep,
is because categorically, a bladed jig is a bladed jig is a bladed jig, categorically. But
yeah,
a Honda Civic, a Nissan Altima, and a Toyota, what's Toyota's comparable? Camry, Toyota Camry.
yep,
Categorically, they're all small cars. Totally different
yeah.
machines when you get down to the basis of them. You know what
I
I
feel
mean?
like the Slobberknocker fishes deeper too, in my opinion. It stays down longer,
It's
in
yeah,
my opinion.
yeah. It will, and it's just again that true tracking. And it's
You got to
not.
get Berkeley to make an ounce though.
we're working on all of that. Don't
I
worry.
was gonna say, I've got somebody who has an ear. Make me an ounce one,
Yeah,
because
we are expanding. We're expanding many things into many different sizes. I'll just put that out there. I
I
can't
can
say
imagine.
much, but I can say that.
Yeah, because honestly, that's the one thing. So I actually started making my own bladed jigs
Mhm.
because I bought like the queen
Mm,
switchblades,
mhm,
because
mhm,
I started putting them on like 3/4 ounce swim jigs to get them down deeper.
mhm,
Because a lot of the times I want to try to fish something, like I hate deep divers. I
mhm.
freaking suck with them. And I think a lot of it has to do with here there isn't, I don't think there's a single lake in Vermont or pond that doesn't have milfoil. It
Uh,
just doesn't. It's
yeah,
just not a thing. Like
yeah.
there's milfoil there, and a lot of times it's so thick that you get a deep diver in there, it's staying there,
Yes,
because
exactly.
that bill hits that thing, and it's there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
a lot of times I'll fish a lipless in place of a deep diver,
Mm,
but it would be nice to fish. Like I bought I think it was I can't even remember, but I found like a 1 ounce chatterbait version thing that was on
mhm,
Tackle Warehouse. But
mhm,
the the slobber knocker, because of the way it tracks, I think would
mhm.
be deadly as an effect. I've literally put split shot sinkers on my line ahead of it to get it deeper.
I love it. And when I tell you something else
So
about a slobber knocker is that hinge, it does a lot better job of cutting grass.
yep,
And like a jackhammer pushes it out of the way. If you've ever
yep,
seen one underwater, a slobber knocker cuts it.
yep,
And so it's like when you go to and you rip it, like it gets hung you like
yep,
that, it's literally takes that grass and just like cuts it off. Whereas
yep.
with the jackhammer, you're essentially pulling it off, which I mean, I think both ways are very effective. I mean, there's a lot of people caught a lot of fish on a jackhammer and grass. I'm not discounting that, but it's just a different kind of it's a
I have the
different,
same
you
experience.
know what I mean? It's a tool. I mean, it's
Yep,
the tool difference is again the jigsaw versus the hacksaw or the jigsaw versus the table saw. Yeah, we could get it done, but if you were doing it with a
yep.
jigsaw, we'd be doing a little bit better, you know? So
It's funny too, like that money badger. Like I had asked you about the money badger, like because to me when I first saw you fishing it, I was like, "That's a dredger." Like I
yeah,
thought it was a dredger when I first saw it.
completely different.
But
Yeah,
then now that I own a couple of them, it's funny too because I actually bought the wrong size the first time by
the little
mistake.
bitty ones.
Dude, those work though.
They oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, oh
Those are actually
yeah,
deadly.
yeah,
So the freaking little ones are actually kind of sneaky,
yeah.
because this time of year when they're, see, in Vermont we have what I call the winter phase. Like you have
Mhm,
pre-spawn, spawn, and post-spawn. In the Northeast we have winter phase pre-spawn,
mhm.
where they're like still in that I'm gonna eat every three
Yeah,
days
yeah,
stage.
winter, kinda warm winter,
Yep.
more warm winter, and then spring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and right now, because of the way we had the weirdest thaw ever, because a lot of the lakes that I'm fishing had ice 5 days ago,
Mhm,
but their water, it was 80 today.
mhm,
So the water went up.
mhm,
And so like the fish are kind of like, you're gonna get like a spread. You're gonna get some that are ready to start feeding up, but then you're gonna get some that don't even realize that it's spring yet.
mhm, mhm,
So those little baits are kind of dirty, because
mhm,
at the end of the day, and this is something that I've actually watched. I actually want to send you a link too, because I know you'll geek out in this. You may have already seen it, but I found a YouTube channel where it's like a biologist that like literally spent 2 years just tracking bass.
hmm,
And like he's a fisherman too, but he literally just ran underwater cameras and like literally explains like the fry and what they do and where they go and what the stages of their life is, and like it's like literally a documentary style YouTube channel,
mhm.
but it's like from the perspective of a fisherman.
That's interesting.
So I really like it, because what I learned and what I think about now is like it's all about energy for
Mhm,
bass.
mhm,
At the end of the day, the bass backs up into a spot, and if it's small and easy for him to kill and he's hungry, it doesn't matter what color it is. It
mhm,
doesn't matter how fast you're retrieving it. It
mhm,
doesn't even matter. And it definitely doesn't matter what real rod line you have.
mhm.
If it's right in his face and he can just go, he's going to do that.
Yep.
And you have to get in that mentality when you're fishing, is like, if you think about the fact that what's it going to take for this bass to eat? If it's
Mhm,
really easy and you present a nice, easy target for him,
mhm,
even if he's not necessarily hungry, that's why wacky rigs, in my opinion, work really
mhm.
well,
Well, I
because you
mean,
drop it in front of him and it's like,
yeah.
and he's like, "Oh, I could eat that."
Well, There's two things that I've learned. First thing is that I'm learning this more and more and more. A bass is very simple in the fact that its mission in life is to eat, make babies, and survive.
Right.
And sometimes in that order, sometimes not in that order. You know, that order can be mixed and matched and in between because like the will to survive will sometimes overdrive the will to eat and the will to
Right.
make babies. And then sometimes the will to make babies will overdrive the will to eat and the will to survive. You know what I mean? So it's like
Right.
it depends on what the brains are doing. But if there's one certainty, it's you're right about the energy thing. A bass is concerned with what is the value of my movement, and when I move am I going to be rewarded with a meal.
Yep.
And like, you know, there's a research study being done that showed that bass can actually smell the caloric value based on what they've ate before of what's swimming around them. Now that's an insane thought, but it's a thought nonetheless, and it's something they're starting to prove. So that means that a bass will literally sit and he'll like be just chilling, and like a bluegill will come bibbity bopping by, and instinctually it knows I've ate that before. I was rewarded with energy, and now I'm going to eat it again. And obviously, they're not having a rational thought. It's an instinctual drive
Yeah.
that's doing that,
Yeah.
but it's still an instinctual drive. And it's so it's like if a bass is being picky, which sometimes they're being picky, not reactionary, that's the kind of thought process they're going through. And then the second thing is to kind of wrap back around to what we were talking about. You're so right about, you know, it doesn't matter rod, reel, line, all that kind of stuff. But that's stuff I do talk about. And it's like, you know, a lot of people will be like, well, hold on a second. I thought you said it doesn't matter what rod, reel, and line I'm throwing it on. Well,
It
it
does.
depends.
It can. Yeah.
Again, that's optimizing your fishing experience and optimizing your chances of once you've got the fish hook of putting the fish into the boat. Now, I can catch just as many fish on a 7 foot medium heavy with a 7 gear ratio and some 15-pound test with a bladed jig as I can with my 7.4 medium heavy parabolic bladed jig specific Abu Garcia winch rod with my 6 gear ratio STX and my
Yep.
15-pound 100% fluorocarbon. The only difference is I'm optimizing the fishing experience and I'm optimizing my chance once I hook that fish of getting him into the boat with the more specific setup. And it's just because it's specifically designed to do that job. And again, hacksaw versus the jigsaw thing that I keep
Yep.
going back to, you know?
And honestly too, you have to think about so the difference too is a big bass versus a buck bass.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that big bass has seen because at the end of the day, bass it's not necessarily the case, but as a majority of the rule, the bigger bass are older. The bigger bass have seen more baits, they've seen more fishing pressure. So the ultimately at the end of the day, the situation that the line a little bit different, not being able to see the line
Mhm,
or a different color bait. At the end of the day, that bass has seen a Senko. It's seen
mhm,
this, it's seen that. But if you have just the tiniest the action on a rod,
mhm.
if the action's a little bit different than the action that they're typically seeing, it's different. And that bigger bass is more likely to hit that bait because it's not looking exactly the same as that time he was hooked. And just
And
like you were saying, their instincts are the last time I saw this situation, I had a hook in my mouth. So
yep,
I'm going to avoid that situation. So
yep.
if you get into the granular details, you're changing the situation, which then can ultimately cause those bigger fish to bite.
And then once you get the bigger fish to bite, that gear that's more specifically designed for that job is going to help you get that
Is
big fish in. Because I can promise you guys, if you've never hooked a 7+ pound fish, if you've never hooked a 10+ pound fish, it is a completely different ball game than a 4 pounder or even a
right.
5 pounder. I mean, dude, a 10-pound fish is a different animal. They are doing everything they can to get off, and they are going to kick your ass. It doesn't matter what it is. They're going to get you. And if
Yep.
you're not got all your I's dotted and all your T's crossed, and you don't have a little bit of luck on your side, that 10 pounder ain't coming in the boat. I mean, dude, you
Nope.
would think like when I caught my 10 pounder, that fish jumped 8 times before we got it in the boat, and there was nothing that I could do about it.
Yep.
I couldn't put my rod deep enough in the water. The only thing that helped me was the action of the rod. It was a very parabolic rod. The
Yep.
situation that I was in, it fit into that situation perfectly. And so instead of the hook popping out or whatever it was, it just buried the hook deeper. It kept the fish hooked. And that's the thing like crankbait and a bladed jig specifically. Dude, I believe people all, that's another question I get. If you could buy 3 rods, 2 rods, whatever it is, 3 rods,
Yeah.
7-foot medium spinning rod, 7-foot medium fast spinning rod, because you can do pretty much anything finesse with that. A 7.4 to 7.6 medium heavy, like all purpose jig, flipping stick. You can throw a swim bait on that if you want to, and then a crankbait rod,
Yep.
like a crankbait rod, because that crankbait rod, if you're throwing anything with treble hooks, not just the crankbait, a top water, a jerk bait, even a bladed jig, it doesn't have a treble hook, but it loves a softer action rod. That's going to allow you to do those things super effectively. And those are the 3 rods that for me, I've always got ready to rock and roll. But that also kind of plays into my fishing style. I'm a big power fisherman. I'm a big, I love things with treble hooks on it. But yeah, I mean, dude, I think that's a really good thought process. I like your thought process on the fact that a fish is all about energy in, energy out. And that is the truest statement, because we always say, big fish didn't get big by being active. They got that way
Right.
by being lazy. They got big by sitting there and letting things come to their mouth. And that's the truth. And so, I think that we can get really in the weeds with a lot of stuff, but if there's one thing that we understand, that the wrong bait in the right place will get them to bite every single time. And the fish is all about energy and energy in, energy out consumption, then you are light years ahead of most people that are just getting into bass fishing. You know what I mean? And now it's just taking the time to learn where do bass live and why do they live there. And there's so many good resources out there for that too. So
Yeah, I was gonna say anybody who's getting into bass fishing, honestly, the best thing to learn is bass behavior before you even learn about baits. Learn about where they should be, and
mhm,
they're not necessarily always going to be where they're following the playbook. But if you know the general idea of what their goal is, what stage are they at? Are they going to make babies, or are
mhm.
they going to be in their regular
Are they going
day-to-day
to eat?
life?
Are they going 3 things:
Yeah.
eat, make babies, and survive. So
Yep.
are they going to make babies? Are they going to eat? Or are they trying to survive?
Yep.
And like making babies is the spawn, going to eat is the pre-spawn and the post-spawn, and the rest of the year when they're not making babies. And the need to survive is inclement situations,
Yep.
weather changes, water drop, water rise, change in temperature. Those are the things where they go into survival mode. And like, but that survival mode can sometimes lead to wanting to eat. And so knowing what
Yep.
survival modes make them want to eat will help you with all 3 stages.
Exactly.
It's really that simple. I mean,
Yep.
bass are literally that simple.
Yep.
They
And
have
then
brains the size of your pinky nail and literally almost as thick as your pinky nail, like tiny little brains. And so it's like those 3 things. You got those 3 things, you're balling out.
and all those technical things that he was just going into, that's where the rod reel line comes in. Because, for example, treble hooks. If you're using straight braid with a treble hook bait and you set the hook like Alex Rudd does, if you watch any of his videos and the camera rocks, you're going to bend those hooks out because you don't have the right shock absorber between the line and the hook.
Yep.
If you don't have a good parabolic bend, you don't have a little bit of give in that rod, you're going to bend it out when you're trying. If you're trying to use your jig rod with your crankbait, you're going to bend that hook out. I
Mhm.
don't care if it's a Berkeley Fusion. I don't care if it's the most expensive hook on
Yep.
the planet. You're going to bend that thing out because
Yep.
if you're using 30, 40-pound braid and setting the hook on them,
Yeah.
it's going to
And
happen.
that's like,
That's where those details come in.
and it's funny, like top water, I love to throw my top waters on straight braid with a little bit of fluorocarbon in the front. But
Yep.
I'm also using a 7-foot medium rod that will bend literally almost down to the handle. And you
Yep.
notice too, like, and that's a big thing about, I guess, just a quick tip on setting the hook. Not everything is a jig hook set. Not everything's a
Right.
crankbait hook set. It's
Right.
knowing the time and the place for both. And it's like a lot of people think, like when I, into a crankbait fish, they're thinking I'm setting the hook hard.
Oh,
That
it's
rod's
the
doing all the work. And really, I'm
Yep.
just kind of leaning
Yep.
into it. And I'm letting that, you'll notice that rod bows over and people are like, set the hook a little bit harder. Well, it's like, I'm doing that because that rod is what that rod is doing is the right
Rod's
job.
doing, yeah.
Where if I'm fishing a jig, dude, I'm straight up over the head, like I'm hitting them with every axe murder. I am an axe murderer, and
Dude,
like
it's
kind of look like it. I do that with the fish. But anyway, but yeah, dude, I mean, just like you hammer their ass and you get a good hook into them and you get them into the boat. But that's just again those little technical things that you learn. That's the toolbox broadening and deepening again. And like, dude, we've gone through it all tonight. Like, my lord,
good.
this has been some good. Like, I mean, like, I didn't think we were gonna get this kind of like deep down, like surface level bass fishing, but I like it. I mean, it's a good
It's
reminder even for myself to just kind of like, hey, Keep it simple, stupid, and then we can get more technical and a little bit higher as we go on. You know what I mean?
That's literally so that's why so last year I kind of refocused my channel, and a lot of it had to do with, and it's not to disparage Tactical Bassin, for
Mhm,
example,
mhm,
but
mhm.
they have a very structured, organized. Right now, you're going to be getting videos about the spawn. You're
Yep,
going to get their spring buyer's guide. You're
yep.
going to get what you get from them.
Mhm,
And it's great information. And I've learned a lot, and a lot of what I know is from watching those guys.
mhm,
But one thing that I realized is I have a lot of friends that I told them I started a YouTube channel, I'm doing fishing. Now you
mm,
have to understand, I work in tech support, and I have like so many different. I'm like a video game guy. I do tech support. I should be a nerd that's sitting in front of a computer all the time. I don't fit in any mold. So a lot of my friends don't fit into that outdoorsy fishing world.
mhm,
And I
mhm,
had people ask me, "How do I start fishing?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "You got to buy like I grew up a fisherman's son. There's pictures of me in a car seat in a 17-foot Sylvan trolling for trout. Like
mhm.
I grew up with it. So I understand. I knew what a polymer I knew how to tie a polymer knot before I knew how to tie my shoes.
Exactly, dude. Yeah.
Like that's just how it is. So when my friends were like, "How do I start fishing?" I'm like, "What do you mean? For bass? What are you targeting?" And then he's like, "No, like, dude, what do I do to catch a fish?" I'm like, "What fish?" Like in my mind, I'm going here and he's here.
Mhm,
So I was like, he's like, "I just want to take my son fishing." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So go to Walmart and buy yourself an ugly stick with a GX2 spinning reel.
mhm.
It's gonna cost you 25 bucks. It's already
Mm.
gonna have crappy line, but it's got line. You don't have to put it on there. Buy an Eagle Claw snelled hook, a package of earthworms, and a bobber, and go to the bank.
Yeah, and just go hammer some bluegill.
And he was like, "Oh, awesome, dude. I'll do that." And in my mind, I was like, it started my head turning. I was like, why did he ask that question? But now I think about it, like I'm trying to make like literally, I made a video the other day on stop and go retrieve.
Yep,
I made a video on fan casting.
yep,
Why? Because to me, that's routine.
yep.
But to everybody that started fishing during COVID, everybody that started fishing because they needed something else to do, because the world's crazy and they need to get away from people,
Mhm.
they don't know all that stuff. They didn't have a dad that taught them how to tie a
And
polymer knot.
see that's perfect. I mean, because like you said, YouTube, it takes all kinds to keep this platform going. And like, and that's what I tell people is like, they're like, "Hey man, will you do a knot video?" And I'm like, "No, there's 1,000 knot videos out there. That's not
Yeah,
what my channel is about.
right.
But there is a channel out there that will cater to your needs in this time in your journey of fishing.
Yep.
And I'll probably see you 4 or 5 years down the road from now when you're wanting just a little bit higher of a level of bass fishing.
Yep.
And then tactical bassing, even more than me, I would say skill wise, we're very similar. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I can probably go to any lake and compete with Matt and Tim from Tactical Bassin. But the thing is the education component that they're bringing to YouTube is just a little bit higher level than me. And then, above them is maybe when you get into more like the Bass University or whatever. But it's
Yep.
not that the information is any more, I don't know, beneficial, or it's like, you're getting your
Yep.
doctorate in bass fishing, but what you're getting is kind of what we went through tonight. You've got this ground level, and then you've got like level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5,
Yep.
level 6, level 7. And when you get to level 25, it's not that they're doing anything magical, that there's a magic bullet in their gun. They're just very technical and very specific in what they're doing to optimize every single level of bass fishing because they're fishing for $100,000.
Right.
Where I'm fishing because I love it, and if the buzzbait doesn't squeak 4 squeaks on the left turn and 5 squeaks on the right turn, I'm okay. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Because
Yep.
it's just the level at which I'm fishing. Where if I were to level up, like Ben Milliken's a great example. He's killing it in the opens right now. Like he's had to level up to that next level. And if you really look at the progression on YouTube and his YouTube videos, all of these YouTube videos that he's been putting out for the past couple years was him essentially honing the knife down even more. Yeah, the katana could cut. There ain't no doubt about that. I mean, that boy can fish. And I mean, if he swung it hard enough, it could cut. But now he's got it so sharp that he just barely has to twist the wrist and it's slicing through. And that is his fishing skills. And so that's beautiful, man. I mean, like that's awesome because like you're giving ground level information to people who want to get into fishing. And then there's going to be a next level that they go to, but then they can always come back to Mike because Mike's their, they
Yep.
love Mike and they love the videos. And then they'll go to the next level, but then they'll always come back to Mike, and that's
Yep.
what I've experienced. It's like there's people who've literally messaged me years and years of messaging where it was like when they first asked me, it's like, what rod and reel combo do I need to buy? And now they're messaging me and they're going, "Hey man, I just got a brand new boat and I'm going to be fishing the opens next month." And it's
Yep.
like it's just
Yep.
that leveling up process. It's getting better. And like you, I was born with a rod and reel in my hand. I knew how to tie fishing knots before I knew how to do my multiplication tables. And so I've always taken advantage of the fact that I'm light years ahead of people who are just getting started. But there's some dude who's 25 and he's like, I want to catch my first bass. And he's coming to YouTube
Yep.
and he's going to need you. He's going to need Gene Jensen. He's going to need this
Yep.
surface level. And then from there, he can start leveling up and getting more technical, more technical, more technical. And what's awesome about fishing is there's a point at which you go, hey, I don't want to go any higher. This
Yep.
is where I want to live. And that's okay. But then there's another level that you can go above that and you go, hey, I want to be this higher level. And you get to go do that. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Or you go from there and it's not even go to a higher level. We'll say, we'll go to a different branch of the tree. Like, it's the same base
Yep.
tree of bass fishing. I think that even more is a better way for me to say this because I hate to put a pro on a pedestal that they don't need to be put on because there's a lot of people who have stickers on their boats and don't know crap about bass fishing. But what they are is they're a different branch on the same tree that we're all on.
Yep. Yep.
And when you start climbing this tree, it's almost like those books we had as kids where you could read and it's like go to page 87 or go to page 69 for a different part of the story. Essentially, we're climbing up this tree and you've got this base trunk of everything that you need to know, but then it splits off into the limbs. And then you get to choose which limb you climb out on. And you can always come back to the base of the tree, but there's 50 other limbs that you can climb:
Yep.
a kayak fishing, boat fishing, creek fishing, you know, shallow water fishing, deep fishing, electronics fishing. It's this anecdotal
Yep.
experience of bass fishing, and it's dope. That's what it is.
And that it's funny because like I started out as a kid, I was doing the whole like when I was in before I got my license, I was the throw some baits in a backpack,
Mhm,
throw a rod in a backpack, ride my bike to the lake. And then
mhm,
I did the kind of the traditional path where I stopped fishing in high school. I didn't really
mhm,
fish that much. Went through college, got out of college, ended up getting back into fishing. But
mhm,
it's funny because I'm in the jigs and bigs multi-species tournaments. I do those a lot, the
mhm,
national ones.
mhm,
And it's funny when you get back to the basics sometimes, because like, I literally spent 4 hours trying to catch bluegill, drop
mhm.
shotting for bluegill,
Mhm.
because
Oh,
I
and it'll
needed to
drive
get a
you
bluegill.
crazy. Yeah, it'll drive you crazy because 'cause you're just like, "How did I get so sucky at bluegill fishing?" Like,
Yeah,
this is what the simplest form of fishing. How am I this
yep.
sucky at this? Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Dude, it's funny because so I don't know if you've seen how that tournament works, but it's a nationwide tournament, and you get a point for every species that you enter, and then if you have the biggest fish in that species, you get 2 points.
That's awesome.
So if you have smallmouth, you get a point. If you
Mhm,
have the biggest smallmouth, you get 2. And it has, like, smallmouth, rock bass, trout, crappie, so it's more of a scavenger hunt
mhm,
than like fishing,
mhm,
but it's cool. I got into it because it was like an easy way to double dip on tournaments
mhm,
because you all your bycatch counts.
mhm.
So you catch a stupid pike, you're like, ah, it's a pike. But now it's like, oh, I don't have a pike yet.
Oh, that's cool. I get that. Yeah, it's almost like Pokemon, like you're collecting
It,
your
it's it's literally like collecting them. Yeah. So like you get it, you catch a crappie.
Yeah,
I don't have one yet. Cool. I'll throw it on the measuring board. The problem is then once everybody has most of those species, now you got to catch a bigger one than what the other guy got.
huh,
And
that's funny.
if you have the biggest one, you're taking his point, and now you're in the 2 points.
I dig it.
So it's not a cumulative score. So the funny part is I've had to learn how to catch species of fish that has been years since I've even attempted it
Hmm, it's interesting.
because I've never really truly crappie fished. I've caught a lot of them by just throwing bait
Bycatch.
out for a
Yeah,
bass,
yeah,
but now and that's what started my like education phase on heroes is I was like, there's a lot of people that don't even know, like I've forgot more than they would know
exactly. Yeah,
because I haven't done it in so many years. So
yeah.
by teaching these little techniques,
And you mean that in, like, the most
it's not
humble.
a yeah,
It's
it's
like
not a
literally, dude, I've
yeah,
literally forgotten it. Like, I've
yeah, I
forgotten
don't know.
more about it than you'll ever know, but it's like I literally have forgotten it, and now I don't have it anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've literally spent hours when I was a kid trying to target these fish, and now I'm sitting there screaming at bluegills, pissed off that I can't catch a 9-inch bluegill to take first place in that category.
that's so funny, man.
And it's like the weirdest thing ever. But that's what I tried to do is like, and the other thing is, as a content creator, you'll appreciate this. When I have my best video, the most views video I have, is on the gilly, right?
Nice.
That
Yeah.
was because I wasn't catching a goddamn thing for 5 hours, and I got pissed off, and I sat in the front of my boat, and I'm like, "I need to make a video this week
Yeah.
because I just wanna get a video out."
Yeah.
And I looked at the gilly, and I'm like, "I'm gonna throw this on a fucking buzzbait and just let it fly."
Yeah.
And I bent the hanger down a little bit so it would stay lower,
Yeah.
and I casted it, and I was like, "You know what? Screw it. This is how I fish 'em." And I just did that.
Yeah.
And then I did it with a drop shot, and then I did it with a bunch of different techniques, and
Yep.
those have gotten, like, more views than anything else where I'm, like, doing all kinds of technical details and
Yep.
actually catching fish. It
Mhm.
was just because I was pissed off, and I was like, "You know what? I just need to make something so that I can get the video out." And that's what started this whole thing is now I'm like, before I like, when I start to spin out, I go, "Okay, you know what am I doing? I'm fishing a
Yeah.
chatterbait in
Yeah.
grass."
Yeah.
So I stop and I go, "Hey guys, today we're gonna show you how to fish a chatterbait in grass."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I do that video. It clears my mind. It stops me from spinning out. And then I go, "Okay, I'm gonna go fish that riprap over there."
That's so funny,
And
man.
it
That's
helps me
so
reset my brain because a
yeah.
lot of times I'm just spinning out because I'm not catching fish. Because
Yeah.
that's the only problem with being hyper competitive in this sport is when you don't catch fish and you know you can catch fish and you're in situations that you can catch fish
Yep.
is the point where you're ready to break your rod and get pissed off and you're just
Mhm.
you start become your own
Mhm.
worst enemy.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's
Yep.
not and that's the part you don't see on YouTube is the guy sitting there in his boat going, "Why the fuck are they not biting the square bill? They should be biting the square bill. I
Now
don't
listen,
understand."
I have said that in my videos before though. I've sit
Yeah.
down and go, "Guys, I really don't know." Like, I am so confused right now as to what's going on. You know what I mean?
I'll
Granted
admit something I probably shouldn't admit on live, but I actually record my intros after I'm done fishing.
I do that all the time. Sneaky YouTube crap,
Because
people. Sneaky YouTube crap.
because literally I'll be sitting a lot of my intros are sitting in my truck, right? And I'll be like, "Okay guys, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna fish topwater because this area sets up really well for it." And then I'll fish topwater for 3 hours and not get a damn bite. And then I'll go back, I'll be done fishing, I'll be sitting in my truck and be like, "So guys, what we're gonna do is we're gonna use a swim bait."
I love it.
Because nobody, and that's the thing is people don't see. That's the other thing I think people have the. It's kind of like back in the day, like the Bill Dances and all the like infomercially and the old outdoors channel stuff is what you don't see is that 30-minute video could have taken 3 days to make
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
because I can't put a 30-minute video up of me casting and reeling because you're not going to watch it.
Yeah, exactly.
If I
Exactly.
don't catch fish, you're not going to watch it. So a lot of
Exactly.
times another reason why I started educating because I can at least make a video that day
Exactly. Exactly. I dig
because I
with
can.
you.
So, but
Yeah.
we are getting on an hour, and I'm sure you probably got all kinds of videos to edit and stuff to
Yeah.
work on.
Yeah, I got the back of my eyelids to look at, buddy. I stayed at home today and mowed the yard, went and mowed mom and dad's yard, and just kind of milled around. So I'm gonna go lay down in bed and watch that crazy Netflix documentary about the Mormon lady who killed her family, and that's
Yep.
what I'm gonna do. So that's it, man.
Some nice peaceful sleeping videos right
You
there.
know it, buddy. You
So,
know it. Nothing like murder right before bed.
dude, it's yeah, that's kind of how it is though. But I want to thank you for coming on. Everybody who stuck with me, I've had quite a few people on here watching. I want to thank everybody for coming along. If you haven't checked out his channel, I made it really easy. Links right in the description down below. Check out his channel. If you think I know a lot about fishing, a lot of it I learned from watching his channel.
Appreciate it.
Just saying. So, but we're gonna sign off here, guys. But again, thank you for watching.